Stalemating is one of the worst ways you can finish a chess game, ending it with a draw. This is just one of the useless chess rules that should be removed. There are rules that make chess the game we know and love, but there are others that just ruin the game altogether and make you want to flip the board over, like this guy. Starting with the stalemate, the worst rule ever. Stalemate is a draw, and it results in neither player winning nor losing the game. It is when your opponent's king has no legal squares he can move to, but he is not in check as well, and there's no other legal moves that can be played, or having all of their pieces blocked or pinned in a way that they cannot legally move. In this example, the white piece moves his queen to the b6 square. For black, his king is not in check, and cannot move to any other square legally, and he cannot move any of his pawns as well, as they are blocked by his opponent's pawn. This results in a draw due to stalemate, and it's completely useless in my opinion. I think it should be a draw for the player giving it. Stalemate was actually a win before the 1800s, but it was later changed. Some players believe that if you can't checkmate your opponent, you don't deserve the win if you stalemate, because it removes the skill from the game. Well, I say the opposite. In a situation where you manage to block your opponent from moving through good positional play, and you were able to capture most of his pieces, leaving him with just a king to protect himself, you should be given the win, since it also requires skill to carefully position your pieces in a way where your opponent can't do anything anymore. You trap them, thus you deserve the win. You see, the whole point of the game is to attack the king and emerge victorious. But then the stalemate rule comes along and says, okay, well played, but don't attack the king too well. Be careful not to hurt the king when you are totally dominating him. Otherwise, it could all end easily in a draw. Completely useless. In fact, Capablanca, Reti, Lasker, Nimzowitsch, and many other top players have publicly shown their desire to have the stalemate rule changed and be given as a win to the person giving it. Chess already is a very drawish game. Giving more reasons for silly draws is simply not needed. Another move that is useless, not needed, and should be completely removed is the en passant. I mean seriously, just why? What's the point? The en passant rule is one of the most confusing rules in chess, and it is a rule that many players may not be familiar with. It's a French word that means in passing. It basically allows you to diagonally capture your opponent's pawn with your pawn after it makes 2 moves forward from its starting position and lands right next to your pawn. If all of that sounds confusing, let me explain. Let's say that the player moves their pawn 2 squares forward from its starting position. If an opponent's pawn is on the square next to it, the opponent's pawn can capture the player's pawn en passant or in passing. The capturing pawn moves diagonally to the square behind the player's pawn, and the player's pawn is removed from the board. It is the only special move that is legal in chess other than castling, where the king and rook switch places, and it was added after the rule where pawns can make 2 moves instead of 1 from their starting squares. The en passant was made to avoid a pawn getting past its adjacent pawns when moving 2 squares up, and prevent it from becoming a passed pawn so easily. And this way, every pawn on the board is prone to be captured by the opponent, and only through smart play will you create a passed pawn. A passed pawn is a pawn that cannot be blocked and has no other pawns on its adjacent files, thus giving it the chance to reach the 8th rank and become a queen. But why? Isn't holding off on moving your pawn and waiting until your opponent gets close so you can move it and swift past your opponent also a smart play that requires skill? It is. Being able to protect your other pieces in a smart way without moving your pawn is smart. Being able to work on your positional play without moving a pawn from its initial square is smart. Being able to wait until your opponent makes the mistake and moves too close to you and blowing past them is smart play. Yes, passed pawns are extremely powerful, and being able to create one so easily could create an imbalance. But this is what makes chess a fun game. It has been almost 150 years since any major rules in chess have been changed. I think it's time for this one to be changed, or actually, completely removed. But what's even worse than drawing because your attack was so good, or playing smart to create a passed pawn, is claiming a win by playing an illegal move. Yes, this is a rule. This rule basically states that if your opponent played an illegal move, and you somehow didn't notice and played your move normally, your move becomes the illegal move, and your opponent that started this could call the arbiter and claim a win by a legal move. It sounds useless just by explaining it. This actually happened with world champion Magnus Carlsen, in a game where his opponent Ernesto Narkiev made an illegal move, and Magnus was unable to spot it and played his move normally. Narkiev stopped the clock and claimed victory on the basis that Carlsen made an illegal move. The initial arbiter at first awarded Narkiev the win, just like the rule states, but Carlsen alerted the chief arbiter, who overruled the first arbiter, and gave Narkiev the option of resuming the game from the position arising after Carlsen's move. Narkiev refused to play and Carlsen was awarded the win. Narkiev appealed the chief arbiter's decision, but his claim was rejected by the appeal board, and Carlsen's win stood. This whole confusion is the reason why this rule should be removed. If both players played an illegal move, no one should be able to claim a win. Time penalties should be given to both players, or another outcome could be to declare the game a draw, which is not my favorite option. We don't need more draws, but still, a win should not be given to any player. Both players took part in playing an illegal move. Chess, especially with games that have low time increments like Blitz, or at a stage where both players are low on time, can be very challenging and chaotic. So awarding one player a win for a mistake both players did is just useless. This rule should be changed and removed from official tournaments. Now, did you know that you're not allowed to touch your pieces if you don't want to move it? And if you do touch it, you are now required to move this piece even if it means this move costs you the game. This useless rule is the touch move rule. In a game between Aronian and Hikaru Nakamura, it was Hikaru's most important tournament in his career. The stakes were high and the pressure was even higher. It was Hikaru's time to move, and he touched his king for 2 seconds as if he was going to move it. But he then quickly realized it was a bad move and removed his hand. Aronian here immediately called the arbiter that saw the whole thing, and then the arbiter forced Hikaru to move the king and no other piece. This rule was implemented in order to keep the position on the board as it is, and remove any chances for pieces to move accidentally when a player touches it, and in order to prevent players from distracting their opponents from thinking. Chess is a visual and mind game. Players are always looking at the board calculating positions, so having the opponent touch pieces left and right and move them then undoing his moves will distract the player trying to think of his next move. But I think it's completely useless. And the fact that this rule is only strict in tournaments shows it. Unless you're playing with your nerd friend that loves the rules, but 99% of the time, when playing over the board with your friends, the rule does not apply, and players continue their game normally and nothing is hurt. But you can argue the fact that in tournaments, stakes are much higher, and players are much more experienced and skilled. Your friend is probably thinking about his TikTok page waiting for you to play your move, so touching pieces would not distract him one bit. But grandmasters in tournaments are thinking of hundreds of different positions. I will let this rule pass, but I still think it's useless and can be removed. And finally, we have another reason to end a game in draw. FIDE really loves draws, I guess. The 50 move rule. The 50 move rule is another lesser known rule in chess. The rule states that if both players have made 50 moves without a capture or a pawn move, a player can claim a draw. This rule is in place to prevent players from endlessly playing on in a position that cannot be won. If a player believes that 50 moves have been played without a capture or a pawn move, they can claim a draw by stopping the clock and asking the arbiter to verify the moves. As if chess really needs more reasons to end the game in a draw. In my opinion, this rule should be removed, and the play should continue normally. Chess is about tactics, attacking strategies, and positional play. Certain openings and positions can lead to a series of exchanges that quickly approach the 50 move limit, increasing the likelihood of a draw. This favors a lame and risk-free style of play. By eliminating the 50 move rule, players would be more inclined to experiment with different openings and approaches, enhancing the overall diversity of the game. Sometimes, a player has a winning strategy in mind, but it requires carefully positioning his pieces and may need more than 50 moves. If his opponent is playing aggressive defense and avoiding the capture, this should be an advantage to the other player playing smart, not the other way around. The argument is that without such rule, a chess game can go on forever without a clear winner or loser. So this guarantees the game would end. But how many times have you played a game of chess where 50 moves were played without a capture or a pawn move? Exactly. Even in endgames, the players often agree to a draw way before 50 moves have been played, so having this rule is pretty much useless. But hey, I am not FIDE, I am RookMoves, just another guy making YouTube videos for fun. So subscribe and join the journey with me. I make more fun videos like this one, so go check them out. There is one on your screen right now. Click it.